What is the Meta interview process like? Is there a lot of coding interview session?
First is you send out your resume. So after they check your resume and you pass, then you go on to take some coding tests. And then coding tests, they're kind of like typical what you will find in code. It's similar to those, depending on the difficulty. If it's a really hard problem, that's all you're going to do for an hour. If it's more simple problems, you're going to maybe solve 3 of them and, maybe take 20 minutes each. Now, after you pass those and everything's good, then you go on to like the actual interview. So they saw your resume and your coding, both look good. Then you go on to a set of interviews. Now, these are 4 interviews. So you have 2 coding interviews where you just code. You have another interview where you go on a system or designing software. And then the other 2, the coding interviews are just straight out, can you code or not? And you tell them, hey, I'm thinking of this. I'm going to solve it this way. I'm going to use this data structure and whatnot. So they kind of like they take a look at how you think through these coding interviews. And then the last one, and I actually think it's a very important one, is actually a personality interview. So this is where, they assess you, they talk to you. It's kind of like you with either a manager or another engineer, and you check whether you're a good fit for the company, like personality wise and like culture wise, like do you fit to the company culture or not? And now after this, all the people who did your interview, they'll gather and they'll do a process and they'll finalize the results. Hey, I think, you're a good fit to join the company or not.
Regardless entry level, everyone have to do design system. Like in Japan, maybe senior or more position do a lot of our system designing interview, but some junior position don't have to do system designing. What about Meta?
That question I would say varies from team to team, level of entry too, right? But at the same time, everybody has some form of systems design or software design. But again, if you're low level, you're probably not going to be asked, hey, like, are you looking into using Memcache or Redis to save our company bandwidth by XYZ, right? It might be a little bit different than that. You might be asked like, if we give you Java in Spring Boot, how will you design this translation web API kind of a question? So, and all of these questions come from the job description of the part you're applying to. So if I apply as a systems or systems engineer, then might be asked more infrastructure or maybe like Linux or server, maybe like a low level question. If I apply for front end or Android, I might be asked like about those, like how to use React or how will I connect that with GraphQL. So it does depend. It depends by your title and the level.
Thank you. The next is, what key skills or experience do you think for get job at Meta?
ここで本編からちょっとずれるんですけど、外資行きたいけど結局英語できへんなって思ってる人いると思うんですけど、外資ってイメージ以上にそこまで英語力求められなくて、流暢に完璧な英語喋らなあかんと思ってる人結構多いんですけど、最低限英語でコミュニケーションできるレベルがあればそこまで問題にならないので、これは実際最近いろいろな外資のエンジニアの人インタビューしてますけど、全員同じようなこと言ってますね。さすがに全く話せないのは厳しいんですけど、自分が書いてるコードとかやってることを英語で説明できれば問題ないっていうのを大体同じような外資 IT エンジニア言ってますね。なので最低限英語でコミュニケーション取れる力をつければいいんですけど、それどうやってやるかっていうと、基本的にはアウトプットするしかなくて、もう英語を話しまくるしかないんですよね。なので英会話とか外国人の友達を作るとかが一番いいっちゃいいんですけど、今回ね僕が紹介したいのは、以前も紹介したんですけど、スピークっていう英語アプリで、この動画提供いただいてて、スピークさんありがとうございます。これ何かっていうと AI と英会話ができて、自分用にカスタマイズしたシチュエーションとかレッスンを受けることができて、例えばエンジニアであれば、コーディング面接対策をしたいので、コーディング面接を英語でしたいです。みたいなことができるって感じですね。めちゃめちゃ良くて、例えばですね、自分の役を候補者、そして AI の役を面接官にしますと。で、シチュエーションは外資 IT のエンジニア、コーディングインタビューみたいな感じにすると、実際これで会話始めれて。
Hello, thank you for coming today. Can you start by telling me about your experience in coding? Here's a problem. Write a function to check if a player receives a red card. How would you approach this?
Is there any restriction like input type or...
Great question. You can assume the input is a list of strings. Each string is a player's card status. How would you handle it?
Okay. So, what is the status? Is red card and blue card and how many status?
The statuses can be red card, yellow card, or none.
So, I define the function to get the string, like red card, yellow card. こんな感じで英語でレッスンできるんですけど、ただこれだけだとチャット GPT と英会話しても同じだと思う人いると思うんですけど、このスピークがさらにいいところは、英会話後にね、こんな感じでフィードバックくれるんですよね。どこが悪かったとか、フィードバックくれたりとか、自分間違えたとこを直せるんですよ。I want to do a coding interview. みたいな感じで復習もできると。なので、英会話後にフィードバックくれたりとか、会話内容に基づいてレッスンを自動で作成してくれたり、デフォルトでいろいろなビデオレッスンがあったりとか、英語学習に必要なものを全部揃えてくれてるって感じなんですよね。この辺もめちゃめちゃカスタマイズすれば、チャット GPT のね、有料プランとか使えばできなくはないんですけど、そもそもね、チャット GPT にも大体お金かかるっていうのと、ここら辺の UX、シームレスに英語の勉強をできる、アウトプット、インプット両方できるってとこを考えると、課金する価値は十分にあるんじゃないかなと思いますね。しかも、これは英会話と比べてですけど、相手 AI なので、間違えるのも恥ずかしくないし、何回言い間違えてもいいみたいな、何回言い直してもいいんで、そこもね、結構いいと思います。初めて英会話やる人とか結構ハードル高くて、人と喋るの、恥ずかしいとかあると思うんですけど、なんか英語学習系の YouTuber の人みたいなのが、英語は間違えてもいいぞと言ってるの聞いて、それはわかるんですけど、そうは言っても、人と喋るのちょっとハードル高いって人にはめちゃめちゃお勧めできるかなと思いますね。しかも今回この動画用にクーポンも用意してもらってるので、気になる方はね、ぜひ概要欄からチェックしてみてください。これ、今回僕、ジェフェリーとの対談で、英語力めっちゃ落ちてるなって気づいたので、僕もね、再開したいと思います。とにかく英語を上達するためには使いまくるの一択なんで、ぜひね、一緒に英語力高めていきましょう。
What key skills or experience do you think for get job at Meta? ウェブデベロップメントにしても何ができたらいいんですか？
First of all, everybody is almost expected to have a good foundation, like a good computer science foundation, right? Your data structures, algorithms, programming, OOP, how database works. So these are core infrastructures. After you have those fundamentals, the next thing is very specific to what you're going to do. More than anything, I would say is experience. If you have experience and you can demonstrate your experience, that's huge. Another thing you can demonstrate is experience things that are not necessarily technical. An example of this is knowing what kind of implementation will have the most impact for users. Right? Or if you implemented something, how can you save the company costs, like server costs, like bandwidth, or whatever? Can your the implementation you've done in the past was able to have this much impact? After the fundamentals, you're looking at two things: your experience with certain tech stacks, and how you're able to bring impact with your skill sets, right? How can I use it to create impact? Like there's different cases where you could be like a fast worker and work fast and implement everything smoothly. Or you could also be a person that knows when to code something the quick way and when to do it the hard way. So you have the pros and cons and you're able to decipher them and you're able to know, hey, this one's going to be more efficient for us. Let's go and implement it this way, right? And on top of that is if you're doing any kind of management or tech lead stuff, then you're expected to know the pros and cons and the ideas as well, right? So you have the skill sets to, come up with implementation ideas, like how to go about solving XYZ or the business itself, right? So it could depend. Two things is, again, experience with the tech stack and then how you're able to make impact for a company as an engineer.
それはなんか例えば大規模開発経験してたら有利とかってあったりするんですか？
Yeah, of course. Not necessarily you have to come from a background of building scalable systems, but if you did, then that's perfect for Meta because their onboarding cost is going to be less. You already know how everything works, and that's like almost like the default preference. So the default preference is yes, you have some experience working with the systems, but if you don't, then you're going to have to prove your skill set as an engineer, and on top of that, how you're able to, make impact. Like, why are you so good for the company? Because again, the company is they're there to kind of make profit, and you as an engineer, right, you need to kind of bring value to the company. So you need to check how you can bring value to a company. If you worked at a startup and it was you mainly building a huge project, and that project became successful and made the company money, that's perfect. You can talk to that at Meta, right? In many of the interviews, we're able to bring impact out. That impact as a software engineer matters a lot, actually, especially for this huge scale companies is the impact, how you brought impact, what kind of impact you brought before, what kind of experience you have, bringing impact. It's very, very important.
Kind of impact is 評価されやすい。利益めっちゃ上げた。スピードめっちゃ上げた。速度改善したとか、なんか what kind of impact?
All of those are good examples of impact. All of those. I wouldn't say, if I were to choose one, of course, it would be money in two ways, right? You either made the company a lot of money or you saved the company a lot of money. That's like easiest impact you can probably build to, hey, I created this new product, I created this new app, and the revenue of the company grew by like 200,000 within 3 months. right? That's like some simple impact. But on top of that, actually, as an engineer, it's almost like a skill set, especially in Meta. And anytime you do a project, Meta is a very data-centric company, which means that whenever you're going to create a new thing and you're going to create like a new product or new feature, new implementation, you should have some metrics that you're going to track, you're going to like evaluate through the course of a period, like 3 months or whatnot. So these metrics are the impact, like the impact you bring within a project, right? So if you can demonstrate that in your previous companies, these are the impacts you kept track of and you were able to improve. Now, the size of that impact, it will matter the most and will be evaluated the most. And you need to like communicate how much impact and what kind of value of an impact you were able to have. Quick example you said is speed. If you were to optimize, it saved the user experience 10 seconds, like in loading. That's huge when you have, like, let's just say 10,000 users visiting a site, like 10,000 times 10 seconds, right? It's the actual value, but besides that, the experience itself a user will have, my tip will just be that impact comes in many different ways. For example, you can have impact by performance, or you can have performance by having some kind of a reliability issue solved. Or for example, if the past 3 years, the company had 5 crashes, and these 5 crashes cost the company $50,000 per crash. Now you came in here, you built up the reliability, and the next 2 years, you had only 1 crash. That's huge impact, right? Even though there was no crash, you saved the company of potentially 4 crashes that will have cost, a lot of money to fix. Right? This kind of impact doesn't get looked at because it's like preventative. However, if you're like the one that does get viewed, ironically, it's like a crash happens, an engineer comes in there and fixes the issue. That gets like its visible impact and everybody's like clapping and saying, yeah, right? But the one who really should be clapped at is the person who prevented those 5 crashes from happening in the first place. So this is just an example where like impact can come in different kind of scenarios.
インタビューにちょっと話戻ると、候補者はどうやって準備すればいいんですか？メタのインタビューに対して。
It depends how much time you have. Let's just put it that way. If you have maybe like 2 weeks, practice your coding. Maybe make sure that you choose the best language that you can actually think in and code, with your eyes closed even. Choose that and then just practice, get that muscle memory going. So when the actual interview comes, you'll be good and you'll be set. Just building that muscle memory, like solving problems, is going to be huge. And then again, you can use different services for that. You have recursion, like LeetCode, you have AdCoder. So building that muscle memory is good. Now, when it comes to the personality one, that really relies on your past experience and your soft skills. I would say at least talk. My best recommendation is to talk with other engineers about engineering stuff, right? Or just talk about engineering and business. If you're able to just talk with other engineers, either engineer or a manager, like regularly, that would be good practice. So you can build, that kind of like that speaking skills for the interview. Now, for the systems design question or the software design, it depends on your level or what you're doing. This is the one where it does come from experience, that you just kind of need experience building all this stuff and you just know how it works because you have 4 years of experience. Like, let's just say you're a front engineer working on React. When you get a React question, you just be able to answer it because you have 4 years of experience, right? You use it on a daily basis. The best thing you can do is reflect. You need to take a moment to reflect on all the stuff you worked up until now, how you implement it, and just note down some of the most important lessons you learned to kind of like refreshen your memory about what you're doing. For example, let's go back to React. When you first implemented the feature, at the beginning required a lot of the foundation of the building blocks. And then, hey, you finish that, and then you just keep on adding new features on top of that. Well, what ends up happening is that you kind of forget what happened when you first build up the initial building blocks. So you may need to like refresh on those building blocks or whatever tech stack you're using in preparation. Now, if you're doing something more where it's let's just say a scalable systems, you're going into infrastructure and you're doing scalable systems and whatnot, then it goes back to that. Hopefully you do have experience with scalable systems by this point. If you don't, then it's a good idea to learn about some level of scalable systems. like understanding what's the difference vertical scaling, why that doesn't work versus horizontal scaling, why you need to add more servers instead of adding more hardware. Another thing is what would be the difference between using a relational database versus no SQL database. Or another one could be like, what about deployment CI/CD? Have you done your own CI/CD deployment scripts? And then on top of that, your data structures, because again, for this, in some scenarios, it will matter. You're going to have to do some level of math in this area, for example, to crunch up the numbers. It really depends. If you have 2 weeks, it's best to work on coding, practicing your coding and building muscle. If you have more than time for that, let's just say you're looking to get this job like half a year from now, you have a lot more time. So it's good to, if you're going on a scalable system, you've never done a scalable system, hey, go read some books on this.
You learn from books about scalable?
From all sources, online, looking from experiences, from coworkers, textbooks, the stuff I learned in college. However, I will do a memo note is a lot of the stuff you learn like in your, let's just say computer science in school, you at the moment, you don't realize how important they are until you start working in the real world with a project that requires this knowledge. Like a basic simple one is database. You're learning SQL because your curriculum, how do you learn databases in SQL? You don't understand the importance of SQL until you enter a company and now you need to calculate an aggregate of all users on this particular group by and work clause so you can get this very specific metric importance until the time comes. Yeah, same with building apps too is the same case. It's until it's already too late.
特にスケーラビリティ、初めそれこそ本から学ぶとかもありかもしれない。多分これとか結構海外でも読まれてるような気がする。あれ全然映れへん。全然映れへんな。データ思考アプリケーションデザイン。
This is one of those books that I recommend a lot of people. I recommend to a lot of people, especially if you're going to a scalable company, a company that has a huge backend, has a backend engineer. This is one of those books that you're going to need. Of course, before you read this book, you do need some kind of fundamentals. You need some level of computer science knowledge. And that's assumed after you have that, the next level up is to do this one. And funny enough, if you go at work at Meta, I had this happen too many times where we would just reference this book actually when we're fighting or we're saying, hey, this idea is better than this idea. We will actually reference the source and reference this book, for example, in those conversations. Fights or conversations and say, this is why it's reason. Because look, if we scale it this way, it's going to be better, blah, blah, blah.
だからこう働いてからも実際辞書的に使うというか、これどうやったっけみたいな使えるってことですね。
Yes. And on Meta, again, Meta is big company is GAFA. This kind of knowledge that almost doesn't make sense or you don't need it at all in many other different companies like a startup. It matters on Meta, right?
So, what type of projects or experience should aspiring applicants focus on to stand up?
It depends on two things. One is if you're joining there and you already have built up experience. So if you already have, let's just say 4 years of experience, hopefully those 4 years you worked at the company gave you a lot of content, a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of the impact you made. In the other case, let's just say you don't have that much experience. Or again, you're trying to enter very junior entry, which Meta does have some entry level jobs as well. So in this scenario, you want to focus on some form of impact that your projects do. So of course, every single project, especially if it's a portfolio, should be used to, hey, kind of like learn a new tech stack, hey, use this, practice, and get your skill sets up. But I would say what's more important to that is if you're able to demonstrate that you're able to build an impact with the stuff that you create. There's so many reasons for this. One is that's what they're looking for. They're looking for engineers who can create impact. But on top of that is there's a little bit the difference between just like a portfolio project and something that actually has created some level of impact to the world, right? The impact one most likely has, real users, has like a real development life cycle to it, which is key from a practicing perspective too, right? You have, hey, designing, gathering requirements, designing, implementing, testing, debugging, and then on top of that, the feedback loop when you do some kind of development or like agile development, where, hey, users requested this, or this was bad, or hey, this caused instabilities. Let me refactor, let me upgrade the systems, let me go back and remove this and add this and whatnot. So there's like that extra layer where you experience more life cycles if you have built something that created impact. There's also those cases where you have some engineers go work at a company. They're there for like, let's say 2-3 years. They built up some products, but let's just say it never got released. In those cases, you're missing that crucial part of the life cycle where you need to, improve the system, listen to feedback from the users, and then so on. So there's that kind of project. Now, let's just say you do have experience. You have no problems with the current tech stack at hand, and you demonstrated you build impact. If you're aiming for something like Meta, the next level up, especially if your company doesn't have it or your past projects don't have it, is to build some kind of project more at scale, or at least with scale in mind, right? It could be a small project. However, what's important is that scaling is at mind here, right? So the most simple example would be creating a stateless server, a stateless application. It has it's not connected to the database. It's nothing. You just deploy it. You copy it to multiple servers, and all of those servers, they access the same database. Or instead of like a database, for example, if you have some form of authentication, you're going to use JWT tokens to do the authentication across all of those servers. Or maybe you have like a microservice architecture where you have the domain service. That one's actually stateful. But then you have all these little tiny ones across that do a specific job and connect to the server, but they're not stuck to any database or anything. And then all the main database has to do is pass tokens across each of the servers, right? These are just simple examples, but there's many different ways to kind of like practice scalable systems. And yeah, another one is a different case, but it's just building your own like mini data center kind of a thing. You have multiple Raspberry Pis. Let's just say you have 8 Raspberry Pis and they all connect to each other. And to top it off, maybe you're using some kind of tool that's meant with scale events, like for example, Hadoop, right? So Apache Hadoop lets you, write and read like files. It lets you have a file system across many different servers. So if you're able to replicate that, then that's huge. Again, this will only apply to big companies like Meta and not your average company, but that's what I will recommend. So focus on stuff, but before that, again, technical stuff outside of the technical stuff, really focus on impact. What kind of impact have your projects created? That will be huge for all of the 4 interviews you will have.
さっき小さい企業でかい企業みたいな話あったんですけど、例えば、学生が新卒でソフトエンジニアになるとしてメタまでのロードマップを引くとしたら、なんかどういう企業を渡り歩いていったらいいのかなっていうのがあって、例えば大企業に行くと、さっきおっしゃってたようなスケーラビリティだったりとかそこら辺の経験はできるが、割と狭まったというかめっちゃ縦割り業務みたいな感じで分かれてると思うんですよね。一方でスタートアップみたいなところ行くと、めっちゃ深いところ、技術的に深いところをやらへんかもしれへんけど、全体としていろいろやるみたいな経験は積めるかなと思うんですけど、ここら辺どういったロードマップだったりとか、どっちがおすすめとかってあったりしますか？
So first of all, let's just say the people who actually get hired at a huge company like Meta, like off the bat without experience, is the requirements are pretty strict. Like you have to come from like one of the toppest schools in the country. You have to have like perfect grades. You have to, on top of that, you did extracurricular activities. You already have internship experience, and you have all of this stuff. If you're that person who, meets everything, you have a good chance at entering Meta right off the bat after you graduate. However, if that's not the case, then you have a different path you need to take. And you need to the only way to really get into Meta would be to building experience, like just building your skill sets up to like at an incredible level, or again, creating some kind of like impact to the world that even Meta's like, wow, this is amazing. Who's the guy who created this kind of a thing. So those are the 2 routes. Now, if I were to give like a general roadmap, let's just say to an average, you went to an average school, average grades. What you will do is afterwards, I will highly recommend you get experience first. Like so the first thing you need to go after graduating is just get experience being a software developer. You can go into startup or you could go into like a middle scale company. Both will be good options. If you go to a startup, You want to be in a position where you have a lot of say in the product and you understand the whole system as a whole and you contributed to the whole system in general. And that's actually the beauty of startups is that you get to do that. However, if your startup does not give you those opportunities, that is bad. Our startup needs to be most likely for experience and getting to use a lot of the tech stack that will be useful for the rest of your career. So now after you have some experience, with this, it could be, a couple of years even. Then you will start moving to either more middle skill companies or, potentially even building your own company. So those are both good options. Again, if you're aiming for Meta, these skills, they pay really, really good. But they also expect you to be, really, really good. For an example, Meta looks at resume and on the resume check, they check your skill sets. Does the skills you use actually fit with the company? Let's just say you're doing game engine or you're doing a video game and you're applying for a backend job. It doesn't align. Or you're doing front end and you're going to go for backend. It doesn't align. It's really hard. So the people that are checking your resume will check that, hey, this person fits the description of our job. And at Meta, there's different jobs. You could be a mobile engineer, you could be a desktop engineer. And on top of that, so of course, you can move around. After you're in, you can move around and that's fine. But for the original post, make sure your skill sets align with the post. And that's what the resume check is. Next, the resume check will confirm that your experience actually gave you enough responsibility, tasks, and you were able to create impact. So your resume needs to show that, right? Mm-hmm. And again, the best way to show that is if you go to a company, you don't want to join that company, just kind of like be passive and not do anything, right? Or just do what they tell you to do, right? You want to contribute and you want to make sure you're creating impact for the company because that impact is what's gonna, others will look at that impact and say, hey, yeah, this guy can do his stuff. Not only are you using the tech stack at the company, but you're also creating this value for either the company or the world or whatnot. So I will actually say do that as well when you work at companies is don't be so passive. If you really want to climb to really high levels of income, then be proactive and try to create impact at your company.
なんかそれってそれぞれ何年ぐらいなんか経験積んで次行くのが良かったりするんですか？どれぐらいのことできるようになったら次行ってもいいよみたいなとかってあったりします？
I'll give you the standard for America, and the standard for America is every 3 to 4 years you're switching or you're upgrading your job. Like in an ideal scenario, you go to a company, you work there for 3-4 years, and then you build up good skill set, you have more responsibility in your hand. And from there, you have the option, hey, do you move up in this company or you're stuck in the company, you need to move up in a different company. You're always looking to move upwards as you gain more experience. So every 3 to 4 years will probably be a good benchmark. And then, of course, once you have a lot of experience, there's what I call a plateau where you can't really get more experience unless you really go to something very specific and specialized. But after a certain point, you can get better, right? Because you already hit a plateau. So after that plateau is you need to work on skills that complement your work. So again, it could be marketing for the company, right? Working with customers, right? Or having like a vision or like a plan for this, or working management. So there needs to be other skill sets that complement your main work and kind of push the project forward. But again, all of these skill sets are meant to work with each other for the purpose of, that impact, like I said. These skill sets, when you combine them together, they create even more impact.
So, the last question, final advice for aspiring Meta or big tech candidates.
My biggest advice, honestly, is to find some kind of passion within this field. And the reason why is because you're going to have to spend a lot of time learning it, outputting it. So with that said, you need to form some kind of passion so it can ease in and so you can clear your mind and you can just focus naturally. You're going to go on what I call flow. And it's funny, a lot of Americans use this, but it's called ikigai. And this is a Japanese concept. And that concept is actually used in America, like the word ikigai in here. So if software engineer is that ikigai, then it's perfect. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Now, the good side is that you can actually combine software engineer with practically any other interest you have, whether it's sports, cooking, gaming, movies, whatever. It's the perfect career to combine it with other things, with other domains. So my advice is to like combine it with other things and have fun. You set up goals, but at the same time you're doing this, because you want to, because it's fun. Yeah, if you're able to find that, it's great. I highly recommend that.
なるほど。ありがとうございます。もう楽しめと。いろんなことやっていろんなことやって楽しむのが大事だというところですね。ありがとうございます。じゃあ、今回の動画は、ジェフリーさんに来ていただいてメタについていろいろ語っていただきました。ありがとうございます。
はい、皆さんありがとうございました。